Okay, I've solved the greatest commander challenge of all time. Identifying the power of a commander deck. Your deck's a 7. Just kidding. I have a friend who built a Yoshimaru Reihan Bracket 3 deck to play at a Magic Con. And over the course of the day, he cut every single game changer, because the deck kept stomping every Bracket 3 game and even won at Bracket 4. And he's not alone in this experience. A lot of players have run into the same thing. Even if you follow the bracket system, it's not exactly foolproof, and we know it's not foolproof. That's why there's so many calls for something like Bracket 3.5, because Bracket 3 is such a wide space, it's a Wild West. And my position as someone who worked on the bracket system and sits on the Commander format panel, CFIP, is that the problem of power and finding balanced games has a hard limit on how much a player can resolve by themselves. To me, this is a technology problem. The brackets are a fantastic way to segment gameplay intent and curate experiences with clear game changer limits. To me, the game changer list is the best part of the entire system. But the system will always struggle when a bracket like 3 has such a wide gap of intent, even if there are limits on how many game changers you can have. It's hard to curate because not every game changer is built the same. So earlier this year, I asked on Blue Sky for players to send me deck lists of decks that punch above or way above the bracket they're legal in, as a way to validate this power score calculator when I'm done. And after 2 months of iterating on this formula, I've finally tuned it to be 95% accurate enough to say confidently whether a Bracket 3 deck is really on the low end of Bracket 3 or the high end, or even if a deck legal in Bracket 2 can play at Bracket 4. So today, you're gonna find out what your deck's actual power is, not just what bracket it's legal in, but what it really plays like. And right now, you can go to commandertemplate.com, paste your deck list, hit analyze, and get some numbers about the deck's power and the real bracket your deck belongs in. But before you run off and do that, you want to watch how it gets designed. And by the end of this, I'll show you 2 decks the calculator scores almost identically in power, even though one is legal 2 whole brackets above the other. And that's the best proof I have that the bracket label on your deck has been lying to you. What you won't get today, however, I'll be straight up, is the exact formula. But I did you all a huge favor.
I have successfully privatized world peace.
Commander Template measures power through 4 factors. How well your deck closes, how fast it gets there, how consistently it does it, and how well it disrupts everyone else trying to do the same. That's really all there is to it. But the devil's in the details, and let me tell you, there are a lot of devils in this one. So let's begin with the heart of power in Commander. Commander decks take such a wide gamut of forms, how they're designed, what they want to do, but the one thing that's always clear and consistent is what the apex of power looks like, CDH. If we know what power looks like, we can break down what power means for deck construction and strategy. A CDH deck does everything any other Commander deck does. It just does it faster, more consistently, and more efficiently. It's my escalation theory line, but compressed. Please watch that video afterwards, it's very important. And because of the multiplayer nature of Commander, being reactive is always going to be weaker than being proactive. You have 3 opponents. I know that might sound wrong given the current Ristic Slop CDH metagame, but without diving too deep into the weeds, CDH deck proves that you need to build your deck to mulligan well into specific game-winning game plans and execute them quickly, even if quickly means powering out a Ristic study or copying 10 of them. If you want to go deeper on this, by the way, I helped write the script for how to build strong Commander decks over on Tolarian Community College with my hero Jesse Robkin.
But the more you can remind yourself from the very beginning of the deck building process, through the final turn of a game, that the goal of Commander is to be proactive, the more likely you are to play well and win games.
If being proactive is the centerpiece of this thesis, then within our formula, your ability to close the game should be one of the most heavily weighted elements. If we took the current categories, the 4 factors, and gave them all equal weighting, we'd be overstating the impact of interaction or speed. Neither really matters if the deck can't close. Now, this doesn't mean that a deck that wins through attrition is impossible, but the fact of the matter is that the deck designed to win better will convert on that goal much more efficiently than a deck designed to survive. But that doesn't mean we ignore everything else. Speed, consistency, and interactivity are dials you can turn to tune your deck. Plenty of players build something extremely strong but inconsistent on purpose so they can naturally draw into their combos or synergies and keep the table's experience fair. Maybe your deck is strong but can't stop anyone else or protect its own lines. Maybe it's strong but slow, which gives your opponent space to deal with you. A ton of examples of how you can control a powerful deck through different qualities of speed, consistency, and interactivity. So, we know what a CDH deck looks like and what it shares with us as the primary factor of power. But the first problem, CDH is contextual to a metagame. Playing Red Elemental Blast in CDH has a very different impact than playing it in Bracket 3. Same thing for Mystic Remora. Which means we can't exactly use CDH staples as a true reference point to measure against. We can't call a deck weak just because it doesn't look like CDH. I know that sounds illogical, but it's exactly what makes this problem difficult. One of the main challenges to solve is the innately strong deck, like Atraxa. Atraxa was even more powerful when she was first printed in 2016, and maybe a little less so next to something more contemporary like a Miram. But these high power decks generally have a lot of signals a CDH deck will also have. The fast mana, the free interaction like Force of Will, Fierce Guardianship, and etc., while having no efficient combos, or just no combos at all. It's very realistic that an Atraxa deck, a Kalia deck, or even a Vivi deck just closes the game with fair but powerful cards that never go infinite. We can assign power to decks like these by measuring how many staples they run or how highly ranked and popular the commander is to discern relative strength inside a deck list. So by measuring card quality, that's enough to figure out if a deck is strong or not, right? Even if it doesn't have any combos. I guess we're done. But here's the real problem. It's called the Krenko problem. Everyone knows what a Krenko deck looks like. It's basically the $1 million secret lair deck on the secondary market now. Thanks for that one. Power out Krenko, play a ton of cheap and bad goblins, untap Krenko, make a ton of goblins, win off a Perfrost or something. On paper, the general composition of a deck like Krenko will always read like a weak deck. So how do you measure something like that? Quick thing before I continue on how this goblin sausage gets made. If a calculator that can tell you your bracket 2 deck is secretly a bracket 4 deck is worth a coffee to you, the Patreon's right here in the description. And by subscribing, you get unlimited decks you can build with on commandertemplate.com. But for free users, you can always have up to 5 and use this feature as much as you would like. You can replace the deck list and just do that. So nothing is gated. It just helps. Alright, back to sausage. How do you solve the Krenko problem? That's why in my system, I calculate the raw strength of a commander. And you're about to ask how I'm doing that. This is the one piece I'm keeping in the Rebel Vaults, same reason I'm not publishing the full formula, but the one thing I can kind of state immediately is that the calculator does not use AI or any vibe reading of text to give you some made up score. It is using just flat functions and will always read consistently. By calculating your commander's baseline power, we can start to measure your deck's innate power, right? Like if you decide to play a Winota deck stuffed with bad humans and non-humans, that still gets the job done because Winota is just broken, right? 3 different main factors of what determines how well your deck wins. So that's something like a Krenko that might have no combos but very synergistic can be as powerful as an Atraxa deck that might have a very unsynergistic, just good cards deck. And in the situation where you build either of these with a combo, that deck will now score higher than everything else. So then the rest of the formula simply measures how much ramp you have and a sprinkling of other things. Your consistency through card draw and tutors, and finally your interactivity by counting how much interaction you're actually playing. Now, this sounds kind of simple, but a lot of tuning went into this. To tune this formula, I had 11 different decks to test from a variety of contexts, based on what I think they should play into versus the bracket they're actually legal in. A Timna Crom deck or any meta CDH deck should always score into bracket 5 high. The goal there isn't to say one CDH deck is more performant than another, because that nuance is way too much to figure out. I've got 2 tests within the CDH range. My own Sisei Elk Gigantha Companion deck, which scores at bracket 5 low, which makes sense given the Gigantha deck building restriction, and a Lumra deck. Lumra's a great example, because it's kind of like the CDH equivalent of a Krenko deck. It's mono green, doesn't look much like CDH, and right now the calculator puts it in bracket 4. That's technically wrong. Lumra is a performance CDH deck, but it's a great signal that the calculator can read power in a list as weird as Lumra. And it also reminds us that this calculator will never be perfect. The goal is to make it as close as possible so we can find better games quickly. And between bracket 4 and 5, the goal is really just to group a deck in there. Those are the brackets with the fewest problems anyway. I mean, there are problems, but not, these kind of problems. And remember the 2 decks I promised you at the top of the video? Well, here they are. I have 2 Eshki decks, both submitted by users for back testing. One is a bracket 4 deck, and it scores at bracket 4 low. The other is legally constructed at bracket 2, but the user told me it actually plays into bracket 4, which I kind of doubted in the beginning, but the calculator proves it. It scores right alongside the bracket 4 build. Now you might be wondering, how can these 2 Eshki decks land basically on the same score? If we compare them, the only real differences are speed and interaction. The bracket 4 deck is slightly faster. The average mana value of its ramp is a hair lower, but here's the interesting part. The bracket 2 Eshki deck scores much lower on interaction because it barely plays any. And that makes sense. It's built to do something powerful and do it fast, which makes it not a strong contender at bracket 4 with much better interaction, but absolutely is able to hold its own there. And it follows our thesis of playing to win is better than playing to survive. Shout out play to win. And that's one of the takeaways I want you to leave with. This isn't about objectively deciding where your deck is allowed to play. It's about giving you the context to know when to hold back, when you're going to be behind, and how to tune for the experience you want. If you own the Eshki deck, the one that's legal in bracket 2, now you know mulligan a little less aggressively in bracket 2 or 3 to keep the game more even, or mulligan harder into bracket 4 because there you're the underdog. And everything we talked about today is just too much to ask anyone to hold in their head, and frankly impossible to expect from the users who need this feature the most, new players. They just need to build a deck, see how strong it actually is, and then find the right games or learn how to tune their deck. Because the goal was never to tell you your deck is a 7, we can all do that. It's to hand you back the one thing the bracket system can't. It's knowing before you sit down at a table whether you're the underdog or the archenemy. So go on commandertemplate.com, put in your deck, import it, see what power it is, and if it's some huge discrepancy, you can let me know. But if not, you can now kind of get a sense of how powerful your decks are and know what brackets it can actually play into rather than what it's legal in. Thanks for watching. So here's the your boy trick on how to know how strong a commander deck without all these numbers and stuff, right? We don't need that stuff. So it's called the slap scale. Basically, I kind of put a deck together, right? I find 100 cards and mash them up. And then afterwards, I take that deck, the whole thing. And then I walk out to the street, go to the LGS, I find Senpai. I'm like, Senpai, does this deck slap? And then usually he'd be like, no, this deck doesn't slap. But sometimes he's like, this deck kind of slaps. And that's how I know that deck really slaps. So next time, instead of just doing all this number stuff, just go to the LGS and be like, yo, does this slap? And then boom, the slap scale. I'm supposed to show this website or something. I don't use websites to build commander decks. I just kind of mash them. But if you want to learn more about it, there's a video here, whatever, you can watch it. Or if you're into the Spider-Mans, the Marvel, the Marvel sets out, you want more of the Spider-Mans. I know there's 40. Then check out this Spider-Man video. Spider-Man's a real guy. I met him.